In this lesson, we'll be working with div tags inside of Dreamweaver. I've got the finished exercise here to demonstrate to you, and we'll work sort of backwards from that a little bit. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to make the assumption that you know how to set up a proper directory, a root directory, and then set up a new site, because you have to do that before you even begin. So before I get into any of the coding here, let me just go to my desktop. I'll just switch over here. So, and just show you my root folder. So you should create a folder before you even start with Dreamweaver. Create a folder on your desktop is fine, I think. And inside of that folder, create an empty folder for your CSS file and create a folder for your images. I will be providing the images, so you'll just need to download them and put the two images inside of this folder. And then you can see here outside of those folders at the root level is my HTML file. And that is the directory structure you must create for this. Now you won't have this file and you won't have this file yet until you start your site in Dreamweaver, but you will have the two folders and you will also have the two images inside of the images folder. That's what you have to do before you even launch Dreamweaver or before you start your site. Okay, so let me just go back to Dreamweaver now quickly. And I'll quickly show you again to create a new site. You go Site, New Site, give it a name. I'm going to call this one last name underscore 02 for the lesson number. And then very importantly, you go to this Browse for Folder. And I'm just waiting on the computer here. There we go. And go and find your folder. So I've called mine root. What I suggest you call yours is your last name underscore root, so that after you hand them in, I'll know who it belongs to. Okay, but if I go inside of there, you can see the directory structure and so on. Okay, let me go back though. What I want to do to establish the site is to select the folder and click choose. I'm not going to do it here because I've already done so, but that's how you establish your root folder inside of Dreamweaver, and it's imperative. You have to do that or certain things will not work. Links will not work and so on. And then you should be able to go to your Files tab and actually see that looking just as it looks here. Okay? So that's before you basically even get started. So now that we have that, what you should do is create a new file when you get started and save it right away. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll come back to this file, this finished file, and we'll talk about how it got created. So again, I'm going to just save an extra file in this root folder. So I'm going to go File, New. And HTML, here's where you get a chance to easily give the page a title. I'll say, use your last name, and just say 02, lesson 02. HTML5, yes, and create. Now, I created it, but I haven't saved it yet. You'll notice it does not exist yet inside of my Files panel. So immediately, and this again is a critical step, save it right away before putting any content on that page. So I can go Save or Save As. It's going to ask me where do I want to save it. And you will have a button called Site Root. I'd say just to be safe, click it. Now I'm already at the root, as I can see here, but if you weren't, you click that and it just snaps you right to your root folder. And I'm just going to call this last name underscore 02, and I'll say B because I've already done it once here. And click Save, and make sure it's at the root level. Don't put it in one of these folders, and click Save. Now I should see it over here. Now I know my original one I called index, but here it is, blank, empty, ready to go. Now I see the two tabs up at the top here. Okay. Also, you should have your properties nested at the bottom here. I can delete this and show you how to do it again quickly. I would say start with a standard view and then go up to Window. Oh, I think I had saved mine already before, so it actually did this. But if I was to go here and close that, and I just wanted to reinsert that because it wasn't there in the first place. Properties, I'm looking for properties. There we are. Now, mine was floating before, but I think this newest version, it's a little bit smarter. It realized I'd done that before and put it back. But let's say I'm going to tear it apart for a second. Let's say it was floating. Just grab it by the top bar, drag it to the bottom till you see that blue line appear, and that's how you can actually nest it. Okay? Yeah, a lot of prep just to get your environment set up, but there we go. All right, so I am on the finished file here. So let me just go to the browser. I've already actually put it in a browser as well, but to preview in a browser, you click on this little preview button and choose your browser. So I'll go again, I'll go to Safari, which I have open right now, and there it is. All right, so these are all div tags. This is a div tag. This area with the car is a div tag. This box with the gradient and the green line is a div tag. And I've nested 3 div tags inside of this div tag, which I happen to name container. These 2 are just absolute position div tags with a different Z index, meaning a different stacking order. And we're going to work with stacking orders too, known as Z index. And then the bottom one here is 1 div tag with 3 div tags nested inside. That's to say they are surrounded by this one main div tag called container, identified as the container. The other thing I want to show you is these 3 div tags at the bottom are done a little differently, these nested ones. This left box, I've got it locked to the left side at 50 pixels distance, I believe it is here. And I've also got it set as proportional, so the size of the box is set in percentages, so that when I shrink my browser, as I'm going to do here, this box will shrink and expand according to the container that it's in. And I believe I set it to a 40% width, so it's 40% of the total width of the box it's inside of. This little box here, I've created what's called an automatic margins, if you will, or paddings, so that it will always maintain a certain distance from the left and from the right. And the right box, I've locked it to the right side at, I believe, 50 pixels from the right. So when I start to drag, watch how they all react a little differently. You see how the green box is kind of shrinking on the right side. The right box and the middle box are not shrinking, but they are moving. And notice the right box maintains that constant distance from the right, where the middle box with the little car is sort of floating, but it's always going to be 40% from the left. Now I put a 40% padding in here, so this is always going to be 40% from the left. So as the box gets bigger, of course, that 40% line moves across. Okay, so that's how those 3 boxes that are nested inside of the container are set up, and that's all done with CSS inside of the external style sheet. Okay, so having said all that, let's go back to Dreamweaver, and we can start to build our new file. I already have it created here, so I'm going to click over to that tab. And the first thing I should do, well, you know what, there's a couple of approaches to this, but I do want to create an external style sheet. So I'm going to use, I'm going to show you the 2 methods for that. So I'm going to click over to my CSS Designer tab, which is where we deal with all our CSS styles. One way to do it, which is how I did it in the first exercise, would be to go to the plus sign, click Add CSS, create a new CSS file, browse, and place it inside of that CSS folder. Now I'm going to show you an alternate method right now. They both work equally well. This one is based on the fact that I'm about to introduce a div tag to my page, and then I have the option of making it internal or external. And if I choose external, then I have the option of making a new style sheet or attaching it to an existing one. In this case, I'm going to make a new external style sheet. So I start by going Insert Div. I probably could have done Insert Div from here as well, but I'm going to go from the menu at the top today. Insert Div. That will pop up a dialog box, which is kind of how it's been working all along in Dreamweaver. The panel is a little bit newer, but anyhow, we're going to work with this insert box here. Now you see at the top we have add insertion point. That's where my cursor was inside of my code, if you will. And since I clicked in, I'm going to cancel this for a second. Since I clicked in, I'm going to click in design view because in fact that is also important versus having clicked inside of code view. Okay, you should be on split, and another important thing, you should be in design mode. Okay, so I'm going to formally click in the design area. Then I go insert div, and it says where do you want to insert it. I have a few choices. I can go add insertion point, after start of tag, before end of tag. We will be using these later when we're nesting, but for now I'm going to say at insertion point, because within the code it hardly matters in so much as it will appear on the screen where I tell it to appear with respect to the CSS properties. Now I want to have an ID because I want it to be a div tag with an ID. I want to use it for absolute positioning. So if I click on ID, you see there's nothing available in my list. So I need to create a new ID for this div, which I could have done over here as well. I'm going to click new CSS rule. That's going to pop open another new dialog box. I'm just going to let you know it's kind of sitting in front of this one. We want to assign an ID. So out of the top sections, we can choose ID. Then you actually apply a name of your choosing. I'm going to call this one, let's see, I'm going to call this one right absolute, because it's going to be an absolute div tag and it's going to sit a little bit on the right side of the other one. So right absolute. You notice I use camel case. I use the capital A for the second word. Do not leave spaces in these. Very importantly at the bottom here, I don't want it to be internal. I want to create a new style sheet. So very critically, and I only have to do this the one time, new style sheet. Now when I click OK, it's going to ask me, where do you want to save this style sheet and what do you want to call it? So I'm going to double click on CSS here. I am in the root. Save as, and I'll just say last name underscore 02, and since I have done one already, I'll call it B. That will be the name of my CSS file. You can see grayed out here my original one from my demo, and we just click save. You can see the pathway here as well, just so you know. And now I have a style sheet, and then it pops up this other cool dialog box, which is the alternate way, or maybe I should say the original way, where we would apply various style attributes and properties to a specified, in this case a specified ID called right absolute. So I'm just going to go in here and go down to positioning. We want to say absolute position. Width, I happen to know ahead of time the image I want to put in is going to be 800 by 450, so I'm going to match that. So I'm going to say 800 pixels. And you have units here, but it defaults to pixels, I believe. Height, 450. Hit my tab key. Now placement, this is where it sits on the screen. Usually top and left will suffice. So I'm going to say, let's say 20 pixels from the top. And let's say 50 pixels from the left. 50 pixels from the left. Now I do want to put a border on this thing. So I'm going to go over to border. And I'll choose the style, solid, width. There are some options here, but I'm going to actually put in a unit number. I'm going to say 3 pixels. And a color, let's just pick a color from the color picker. And I do have some saved colors. Anytime you make a color, you can click plus to save them. I'm going to use this saved red. And then you hit your return key. You see all that. So I've got a border established, and I've got positioning and location established. This is good enough for what I need right now, so I'm going to click OK. And then click OK again. And there it is. Now it does have placeholder text inside, and I want to point out to you under the CSS Designer tab what got created. So there is my actual file. And inside of that file I created a rule called right absolute. And you notice the hashtag, which means it's an ID. And then inside of properties, if I want to see the properties, I would click on show set, and that simply isolates the current properties. Now I can always go in and edit this change, add, delete properties as I see fit. Okay, and this is probably where I would edit it at this point on if I was to make changes. But let me just click show set one more time. You can see my width 800 by 450. Position is absolute, and if I scroll down here a bit, or I can actually adjust my windows a bit here as well. You see a box for positioning. So I've said top and the bottom, but you can see here, you can manually insert it, and you can set it to percentages and other different types of units as well. Okay, so that's the style I created. Here it is manifesting itself on this div, and if we go into code view for a second, you can see the div tag right here. And the cool thing about code view too is if I click an opening tag, it does show me the closing tag, so you can see the different areas, if you will, by clicking the opening tag. And they are collapsible too, by the way. If you have a lot of code, this might be handy for isolating certain areas. It's just a nicer interface, I find, in the code view here. Now look at the top here where it says source code. There's also a tab for my CSS, but I see that it has an asterisk, as well as my file has an asterisk. That means the file has not been saved to the latest changes. So what I recommend always when you see your asterisk is to go to File and choose Save All. What is the difference from Save All and Save? Save All will actually save your CSS file as well. So let's click Save All, and the asterisk has now disappeared. So I can also click on that tab and currently see the CSS code that we've created. So remember, we were creating these manually before. Now they're generated. However, I can go in and manually change them anytime I want, just by clicking and typing away. Okay, I'm going to go back to source code, and I'm going to go back to split view here. All right, so let me just pull this down a bit. So there, I can click away as well. There is my first div tag. So I want to insert an image in there. So I'm going to actually highlight this text. You notice when I click, it actually creates a little handle. I'll talk about that in a minute here, but let's just insert our photo for now. I'm going to delete that text. And with my cursor flashing inside, it's a little hard to see, but it's flashing inside. I'm going to go to Insert. Now I've already placed the image in the Images folder. So I just need to go and find it there. And that's the one called Car GTO. Open. There we go. So now I have a placed image inside of that div tag. So yes, when you click in your design view and you click on it, if it's an absolute div tag, it will have this little handle at the top, which means I can actually manually click on that handle, and I have two options here really. I can literally drag it around the screen organically and relocate it, which is pretty sweet. And that's actually changing all the CSS code. If I click up here, you can see the CSS code down here. You see I've changed the left to 182 and the top to 14. If I want to change it back or just change it, I can actually come down here as well. So many places where you can actually affect the settings for your code. So I'm going to set this back to 50, which it was originally. Hit my, oh, let me just try that again there. 50, hit my return key, and you see how that updated on the screen. And from the top, I believe I had it set to 20 originally. So I'm going to go back to 20, hit my enter return key. So I've repositioned it, but I've just shown you that you can organically drag it around the screen, which is quite nice. Or you can go with numbers and be very specific. Okay, I definitely want to do a save all at this point. So that's major steps on how to create a div tag, and then how to add rules inside of the CSS external file. If I go back over to the designer view here, you can see my external file which we created, and the first rule which applies to this specific div tag. And you'll notice in the code, it automatically applied the ID to that div tag. ID equals right absolute. Okay, so it's doing a whole lot of stuff on your behalf inside of here. And I have saved, so let's move on to the next one, which was a little box sitting on top. So you know what? I'm going to use the same technique as I used for this one. So I'm going to go Insert, Div. Add insertion point. That's fine. That's fine. In fact, let me cancel that for a second. Let's say I wanted to click inside here. I'm just going to click in the window again here and do that one more time. Div, Add insertion point, ID. No ID is available, so I need to create one. And that's where we click the new CSS rule. And we'll go through these assortments of dialog boxes. So I can choose the type of selector, ID. Once again, I'll type in the name. This one I will call left absolute. Left absolute. Okay. And very critically at the bottom here, you need to designate where it goes, and I'm going to say the existing external style sheet that I've created, which will be available in the list. Do not select this document only. Yes, it will work, but your code will all be on your page, which is not a best practice. So selecting the appropriate location, which is the external style sheet, I can click OK. Then I'll get that next dialog box, which is how do you want to dress it up, basically. So I'm going to give it a border and a background color and a location and a size. Okay, so let's start with the location and the size. We have to establish that it's absolute, so it will always be in that fixed location, XY coordinates. Width, let's say 200 by 200. Let's make it square. 200 by 200. And location-wise, I'll say, I'll put it maybe 50 from the top. I may change this after, but I'll start with 50 from the top. And let's say 20 from the left. So kind of reversing those numbers from the previous box. So I've got a box here, absolutely positioned, basically pinned to the screen, with a width of 200 by 200. We'll be sitting 50 pixels from the top, 20 pixels from the left. Let's go now and deal with our border and then our background. So border, I'm going to say solid once again. Let's establish 2 pixel border, relatively thin, and I'll pick a color here. Oh, let's just go with a green, and we'll make it sort of medium toned. Hit my return key to accept that, and I'll put a background color in as well. I'm going to choose a yellowish color, a warm yellow. There we go. Hit my return key for that, and click OK. And then add insertion point, yes. And you see how it put the ID inside of that box now? And OK. And there it is. So I just want you to put your name in here. And actually, I'd like you to center it. And I'm going to show you how you can center it. With it selected, if you go down to Properties, CSS, you can just click Center, Align Center. And then just type in your name. If it's a long name, you might want to use 2 lines, but I'm just going to put it on 1 line. There we go. And good to go. And if I did want to change that and make it an H1 or something, why don't I do that? I'll make it an H2 maybe. I can just go over to Insert while it's selected and just change that. Okay, so yes, I'll say make it an H2 tag once it's in there. And we're good to go. Now if I click away, you can see it's got the green border, the yellow fill. And if I click on it, I do have the option of grabbing that handle and manually moving it. Or with that selected, I can actually change it numerically in the properties. Okay, so let's do a save all. I can see the asterisks up here right now. File, save all. Now we actually haven't really looked at this yet in a preview. There's sort of 2 ways you can do a preview. I'm going to click away here right now. I could just go to live for a quick preview. And most definitely you can see my work in there. I do want to switch back to design. Or if you want to formally preview it in a browser, you can go down to this little button here and choose your browser. And it might take a second or 2 to materialize. Or longer. Just waiting on my computer to catch up here. Okay, let me close that and try that again. That's just my computer being slow. Try that again with feeling, as we say. There we go. Yeah, I don't know what was glitching out there, but as I said, it will be fairly quick. So there we have 2 div tags. Okay. They are absolute, meaning no matter how I stretch my window, they will always be fixed and pinned from the top left corner of wherever they are. Okay. So let's go back to Dreamweaver now, and we'll do the next set of div tags, which will be a container with 3 nested div tags. And I'm just switching back to Dreamweaver to do that.